most sessions after lunch are a little bit difficult, but this one is especially difficult with the rice and dosa and so on, quite an elaborate spread. I'm SP Raj. I am from the Whitman School of Management, which is across the street next to the Sheraton. And I'm a professor of marketing. And you're wondering what I'm doing here. It's a devious route I've taken here, lots of detours. One of the prime reasons I'm here is I have been corrupted the right way by my wife, Sudha. Corrupted the right way. She's a nutritionist, and she says, do this, do this, do this. Eat well, and it's tough life. But so that's one reason I'm interested in this topic. But more important, I have gotten involved in agribusiness as a result of about 3 years I spent at Cornell. And Dev Partner Roy just vouched for the fact that I was there. She said, I've seen you before in Warren Hall. And I said, why? And she said, you were there. So I spent 3 years at Applied Economics and Management, where one of the areas of focus is agribusiness. So that got me even more interested in it. And as a result of all that, and I'm doing a little bit of selling for the next 1 minute, we've launched a new journal which I edit. It's called the Journal of Agribusiness in Developing and Emerging Economies, which you see a flyer at the back there. Please take one if you have either interest in reading about those issues or writing for the journal. It's now in issue 2.3, meaning second year, first issue or so, and the next issue forthcoming shortly. It's quite broad in perspective. It covers all of the areas that we've heard before today and hopefully will hear later on. That said, today in this session we have 2 speakers, and so each of them will get a few more extra minutes than noted on this schedule, and then that leaves us still plenty of time for additional discussion. And in case you're curious, I originally come from India. And it so turns out I was challenged by somebody in the audience today about whether I knew my own language, which is Tamil, and that was from Clarence. He spoke to me in Tamil, and I said, what are you saying? And sometimes context matters. You don't expect Tamil in the middle of a conference here, but his Tamil is very good. His daughter, Ithi, is right next to him. She is an undergraduate here in international relations, and they grew up in I say because Clarence says he has lived in India since age 3, since he was 3 years old. He in a very nice hill station in India called Kodaikanal, and as you can see, he is still going strong, going back and forth between India, Afghanistan, and so on. So let me start by introducing Dev Partner Roy, and then after she's done, I'll introduce Clarence. Dev Partner Roy is at Cornell right now, and she also used to be at Cornell when I was there. She did her PhD at Cornell in rural development and sociology. Development sociology. And she has also studied a lot of BT cotton in India, in Gujarat, and perhaps that was the topic of your thesis and so on. And her master's prior to that was from India in biotechnology. She originally comes from, we don't have a map here, from West Bengal, but actually has lived all her life in Gujarat. And welcome, thank you, and you have about 20 minutes.
Thank you, Dr. Raj. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The topic of my talk today is reclaiming developmentalism, state, civil society, and firms in genetically modified crop debates in democratic India. So this is basically a story of cotton seeds, which you can see on the left, cotton balls actually, and brinjal or eggplant seeds in India. We had some excellent brinjal curry for lunch today. So these are some of the decisions that have been taken regarding BT seeds or genetically modified crops in India. First, BT cotton was approved by the government of India in March 2002. What is BT cotton, you might ask? BT cotton is a type of genetically modified cotton in which a gene from the Bacillus thuringiensis, which is a kind of bacterium, is put into the cotton plant by scientists. And this gene makes the cotton plant less susceptible or not at all susceptible to certain kind of pests. So it becomes a pest-resistant cotton for certain kinds of pests, okay? So BT cotton was approved by the government of India in March 2002, and it's still going strong in India. It's the only genetically modified crop being cultivated in India. A moratorium on BT brinjal or BT eggplant was placed by the government of India in February 2010, and that is still going strong. So BT cotton is the first and only genetically modified crop in India, and BT brinjal might become the first food crop which is genetically modified to be grown in India. Now, most of the media and scholarly focus is generally on the public debate between the pro and the anti-GM groups, but the topic of my talk today is the policy debate within the Indian state. So the purpose of my talk is to analyze the interactions of opposing interests within the Indian state over the introduction of genetically modified crops. This is my outline. First, I'll discuss the phases of democratic developmentalism in India. Next, I'll discuss a typology of seeds. I will argue that there are 3 types of seeds in India currently. Then I will discuss my first case study, which is BT cotton. Then I will discuss my second case study, which is BT brinjal. Finally, I will present my findings. So there is a debate on this topic. Can the state simultaneously nurture capitalist development and democracy? There are 2 answers to this question, yes and no. Countries such as South Korea have said no. They followed the model of authoritarian developmentalism, which means that the state first takes care of economic growth. After a certain level of economic growth is reached, the state begins to nurture democracy. So this is what happened in South Korea and Taiwan. India, on the other hand, followed the model of democratic developmentalism, which means that the Indian government decided that democracy and economic growth both were important to the nation state. So these are some of the features of the democratic developmentalist state, or DDS, in India. First, there is simultaneous pursuit of 2 goals, development and democracy, since January 26, 1950. The DDS said yes to economic growth, but not at the cost of civil and political rights of the citizens. And thirdly, since about 1951, we have state-guided planning to integrate 2 models of economic growth, 2 very different models. First, the capitalist model of the United States, and second, the socialist model of the USSR. So these are the 3 phases of democratic developmentalism in India. The first is the Nehruvian phase, which is also known as the socialist era, from 1950 to 1966. I have included some other prime ministers too in the Nehruvian era. Then comes the populist era, which is the reign of Indira Gandhi from 1966 to 77, interspersed by the Janta regime from 77 to 80, and then followed by her second regime from 80 to 84. And third is the neoliberal economic reforms era, which kind of begins in 1985. The moment of transition is between 85 and 91. And there are various governments in this era, and it's still going on. So my hypothesis is as follows. There is an internal struggle between the DDS interest and the NMS interest. DDS stands for Democratic Developmentalist State, and NMS stands for Neoliberal Minimalist State. So this struggle is for control over this Indian state, for control over the seed sector, and over introduction of BT seeds. So before I discuss my hypothesis, I will discuss the typology of seeds. So there are 3 types of seeds in India. These are Weberian ideal types, to use a bit of sociology jargon, which means they are paradigms or models. The first is traditional seeds, Deshi Bij in Hindi. The second is state seeds or Swadeshi Bij in Hindi. And the third is transnational seeds or Bahurashtriya Bij in Hindi. So these are some features of the traditional seeds. First, they are local varieties, farmer-bred and farmer-owned, supported by the seed sovereignty movement, which is anti-GM or anti-genetically modified crops. They are not supported by the Indian state, and they are not supported by transnational corporations. Next, we come to state seeds. Example of state seeds are hybrid seeds or green revolution seeds. They are bred by public sector scientists. They are manufactured by domestic private seed firms. And they're supported by the democratic developmentalist state interest, not by the NMS group. The third is the transnational seeds, which are BT seeds or gene revolution seeds. They are bred by corporate scientists. They are manufactured by transnational corporations in partnership with domestic private firms. And they are supported by NMS interest or neoliberal minimalist state interest. So these are the seeds and their supporters. To recapitulate, traditional seeds leads to local control of the seed sector, supported by the seed sovereignty movement. State seeds leads to state or public sector control of seed sector, supported by DDS interest. And transnational seeds leads to private sector or TNC control of seed sector and supported by NMS interest. Now, during the socialist era, you only had traditional seeds in India. During the populist era, the Green Revolution occurred, and hybrid seeds or state seeds were introduced. During the neoliberal era, the GN revolution has taken place. In other words, BT cotton or transnational seeds have been introduced. So these are some milestones in the story of BT cotton. In 1996, BT cotton was first cultivated in US, first to be cultivated anywhere in the world. Around 1999, we think BT cotton was introduced by stealth into Western India. In fall 2001, some scientists of transnational corporations discovered that BT cotton was illegally growing in Gujarat. And they went to the government in New Delhi and complained about it. On March 25, 2002, permission was granted to Mexico Monsanto Biotech Limited by the government of India to sell BT cotton seeds. So in the policy debate between DDS interest and NMS interest, who won? Let me tell you why. So it was NMS which won. Some of the factors that led to the 2002 GOI decision were as follows. First of all, it was a fait accompli due to stealth seeds. There was clear demonstration in actual farmers' fields that BT cotton worked well against the pest, and it also boosted yields. Now, cotton is a cash crop important to the national economy, and there were pre-existing lobbies of cotton farmers in many of the states. Cotton has been grown as a hybrid crop since the early 1970s in several states of India. So there were many cotton marketing cooperatives and other associations of these Green Revolution benefited farmers. There was strong support by some state governments of India who listened to their cotton farmers who wanted BT cotton. Especially the states of Gujarat and Karnataka told the government in New Delhi that even if you say no to BT cotton, we are going to let our farmers cultivate BT cotton. And finally, there was scientific consensus that BT cotton is a public good. Even though some scientists like Dr. Push Bhargav said that BT cotton may not be good for India, most of the scientists believe that it was in the national interest to let BT cotton be cultivated. So we come now to BT Brinjal. In the policy debate between DDS and NMS for control of the Brinjal seed sector, who won and why? DDS won, let me tell you why. Some of the factors that led to the February 2010 moratorium that is still continuing. First of all, there are no stealth seeds as yet. So there is no actual demonstration that BT Brinjal will work in farmers' fields against certain pests and that it will boost yields. Brinjal also happens to be a food crop. It currently accounts for about 10% of the total vegetable production in India, has grown on about 8% of the total land on which vegetables are grown. Brinjal is a poor man's crop. It's eaten widely by the poor. Apart from potatoes, I think that brinjal would rank as probably number 2 after potatoes. And there are no pre-existing lobbies of brinjal farmers in the way that you have with cash crops like cotton. So there are no brinjal farmers clamoring for BT brinjal. There is no support of state governments. Gujarat Chief Minister Narendra Modi, who supported BT cotton, has gone on record saying that he doesn't want BT brinjal. There is a lack of scientific consensus. Even Dr. M.S. Swaminathan, the eminent scientist, has not seen any need for BT brinjal. And lastly, there is strong opposition to BT brinjal by the seed sovereignty movement. So Jairam Ramesh, who was the Honorable Minister for Environment and Forest at the time of the February 2000 moratorium, he went actually to 6 different cities of India, held public hearings, and the outcome was that a moratorium was placed. So these are my findings. The Indian state, which has followed a model of democratic developmentalism, has achieved modest success in simultaneously nurturing economic growth and democracy. I think this is important because most scholars either look at democracy or they look at economic growth, but we need to analyze both together because that was the reason why the Indian state pursued democracy and economic growth simultaneously. While Nehruvian era, this was considered important to pursue democracy as importantly as economic growth. Second finding is that the tradition of democratic developmentalism, which is state intervention in seed sector, is being challenged by the ideology of neoliberalism in the guise of a minimalist state. In the BT Cotton episode, NMS won the policy debate because of factors related to India's democratic context, like the introduction of stealth seeds by a small firm, and the nature of the cotton crop is a cash crop, which has important farmers' lobbies. In the BT Brinjal episode, the moratorium signals may be temporary victory by the DDS because of factors related to India's democratic context and nature of brinjal crop. But BT Brinjal's future remains uncertain because any number of things could happen in the future. First, stealth seeds could be introduced. Second, brinjal farmers could be mobilized to clamor for BT Brinjal. Or it could be that the current legal troubles surrounding biodiversity might become more important, in which case there will be no BT Brinjal, so the future is wide open. Lastly, I want to tell you a story about what I think is going on. If you have heard this story, please bear with me. This is the story of the monkey and 2 cats. Monkey is Justice. So there were 2 cats which found a piece of, a rather whole cake, and they started fighting about who the cake belonged to. So a monkey heard them fighting over the cake and came by and said, "Let me help you distribute the cake, divide the cake rightly." And it divided the cake into 2 pieces after the cats agreed to him acting as the judge. And one piece happened to be bigger than the other piece, so he nibbled at the bigger piece, and you get the idea. Soon, only a small piece was left, and he said, "Oh, I have worked so hard for you. Let me take this last piece as my fee for helping you come to the ideal Ram Rajya or land of justice." And then he scampered away. So the pro and the anti-GM groups are basically the squabbling cats, and the DDS is the monkey. It's kind of becoming important. Okay, that brings my talk to a conclusion. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Our next speaker, about whom I said a little bit before, is Dr. Clarence Maloney. He earned his PhD from the University of Pennsylvania, and as I said, grew up in India before that since the age of 3. He has written 6 books, one of which, and I said, can I mention one of them? He said this is not necessarily his primary area of research, but one he thinks he's proud of, is Beliefs in Fertility in Bangladesh. There are 6 other books which the SU library possesses that he has written on other subjects. Best described as a social scientist, anthropologist, and he has been a team leader on many projects in South Asia and right now in Pakistan and Afghanistan. All right, please. And as I said, his daughter Ethi is here too.
Thank you. I'm not now now in Afghanistan. I was there until recently, and I was supposed to go back in another water resources project with a Canadian company, but they asked for my age, because we don't put that on our passport in America. So I told my age. I'm 77, and then they said, you're not eligible for a work permit. And they took that to the top of the ministry, and the ministry said, well, the president has signed it, so here I am. Thank you. I was, for the last 2 years, as capacity building specialist in Herat in western Afghanistan with an Asian Development Bank project in water resources. And I was also working a lot with water users associations. And I also evaluated a U.S. aid project in Badakhshan in the mountainous northeast, which was a livelihood project. So I have only those 2 experiences in Afghanistan, but I worked 30 years in other South Asian countries. Where is this? Oh, it's upside down. I want to begin with something positive because there are so many negative things about Afghanistan, which I will also repeat. But there has been a lot of development within the last 10 years. The Russian invasion was in 1979. We got the Taliban out in 2001. So the last 10, 11 years has been a chance for development, and there's been a lot. Health service is now within contact distance of the majority of the population. The majority of children are in school, and a third of them are girls. Per capita income in stable currency has doubled. But in Afghanistan, malnutrition is among the world's worst. 60% of children are stunted, 34% underweight, 72% have iron and iodine deficiency. Majority of women are iron deficient, and 10% have night blindness from vitamin A. 500,000 children under 5 are at risk of severe and acute malnutrition. The big problem is population and water. There has been no census since 1979. So what we have on demographic statistics are sample surveys, and they vary quite a bit. But the population is approximately 30 million, and the growth rate is about 2.5% a year. The completed fertility was over 7, which is of course high, and come down to 6.4, and now it is, according to some estimates, 5 or 6 or 7, depending upon, no, not 7, 5 or 6, depending upon what agency is doing it. The issue is how fast this completed fertility rate will come down to the level of population stability, which would be 2.1 children per woman. In some countries, that's declined fairly fast. But I don't see that this is going to decline very fast in Afghanistan because of many reasons. 40% of children are under age 15. Child mortality, the estimates range between 85 and 150 per 1,000 births. That is children under 5. And there is food shortage now. 15% of wheat is imported. Most of the rice is imported in a normal year. Irrigation water is the main constraint, which is what I'm emphasizing, because I was working in a water resources project. On most of the canals, even now, in some parts of the canals, farmers have to alternate water. By local agreement, they alternate every other year, or in some places on the canals we worked, the farmers agree to irrigate their lands only once every third year because there's just not enough water. And climate change is aggravating the situation. This shows food insecurity, particularly in the central highlands, in the northeast, in the concentrated Taliban area in the east, and in other spotty areas. This is not a map of recent statistics, but estimates based upon earlier data. Rainfall is very scanty. We have about 10, 12, maybe 15 inches of rain a year in the mountainous northeast, and about 10 inches of rain a year, or 8 inches in the north, 6 inches in the north. In the south and in the west, about 4 or 5 inches of rain a year. Now, what can you grow under these conditions? 80% of the surface water used is snowmelt. And all of the snowmelt runs north, south, and west, and all of those water resources are practically used up before the rivers go into the neighboring countries. The one river that does flow out of the country is the Kabul River, which flows into the Indus. Something interesting here, this rift here into the Wakhan corridor is where the South Asian land mass, the South Asian plate, continental plate, pushes up against the Eurasian continental plate. You can easily see it if you fly over it. So this is an earthquake zone. And this is where several of the big dams are being built. You can see the barren hills there. If the whole landscape is barren, except in parts of the east. And when it rains, the water rushes down these what are called washes. You can see there on the left, a wash where the water rushes down after a rain and otherwise it's dry. And these washes destroy the irrigation or the agricultural fields if they're in the area, and they're only temporary, so they don't yield much in terms of irrigation potential. But this is near Herat. You can see where there is irrigation, it's pretty good. As I was saying, the water in these rivers don't flow out of the country. The Amu Darya flows on the national boundary of the Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Turkmen Republic, and there are agreements there, but all the water is used up, as you can see there, and the same with the Haridud River in the west where I was, and the rivers in the south. Now, the snowmelt is in April, May, June. But the crop requirements, when the crops are growing and big, they require water in July, August, September, October. So there's a mismatch there. The crop that avoids that is winter wheat, which is planted in the fall and harvested in the spring. But they also try to grow spring wheat where there is about 10 inches of rain in the north, and that doesn't get water when it needs it. But then the fodder crops, the millets, and the other crops need water late in summer, and many of the rivers, the irrigation channels are dry. You can see here. Now, worse than that is the recurring droughts, and these seem to have been increasing. In 9 of the 13 last years, there was significant lack of rain. 98 to 2001 over large areas. Then migration to cities. Because of the wars and also because of some of these droughts, about 4 million Afghans moved into Afghanistan. Now many of them have come back, the majority have come back, still about 1 million in Afghanistan. And right now there are about 1 million Afghan men working in Iran. They go when there's a drought, and sometimes they stay there and bring money back for the family. Just last year, there was another shortage of rain all across the north, and wheat prices increased 80%. And now this year, 2012 winter, has been exceptionally cold. And I've read figures about poor people who are starving, and of course, malnutrition, children, and people who don't have resources, they sometimes don't survive. So the general conclusion is that deaths from conflict are many, many less than deaths from poverty and malnutrition. And so what we read in the newspaper is distortion of the real problems. So snow melt is coming earlier because of climate change. And also, it's become warmer. I read one study that temperature in the Kabul Basin increased 4 degrees in the last, I don't know, 20 years or so. I'm not sure of that as reliable statistics, but anyway, people agree that there has been an increase in temperature, so of course more evaporation. And the Kabul Basin is under threat of being insufficient for agriculture. It may support the population of Kabul, which is now, who knows what it is, 5, 6, maybe 7 million. But it will not support groundwater irrigation anymore. U.S. Department of Agriculture quotes that more wheat production to meet the population requirement will require more irrigated wheat, which is an unlikely increase. So there is a new water law which was promulgated in 2009 under the advice of the Germans and other consultants. And it is a comprehensive water management program from the mountainous watershed through all of the agricultural systems, towns, residences, industries, institutions, military, and so forth, plus maintenance of river flow for ecological reasons and groundwater. Under the new water law, there is supposed to be overall management with water users associations at the branch canal or sometimes distributary canal level, and then a sub-basin council representing them, and then a basin council. And then from the government side, you have this series of offices. So this is something totally new. It's idealistic. The Europeans have persuaded the government to try it, but whether this kind of structure can be imposed in Afghanistan, we will see. So this is our project, the Western Basin Water Resources Project, funded by Asian Development Bank, implemented by Shladia, which is an Indian-owned company in Rockville, Maryland. The objective was improvement of livelihoods through efficient use of water and agriculture. $90 million. Most of it is for rehabilitation of old canals, many of them centuries old, which were produced by the authorities over the last several centuries and have been neglected in the last 30 years of conflict. And then there's an agriculture section of the project, and then an organizational side of the project, formation of water users associations. That's what I was largely doing. And then a women's livelihood component. $90 million, quite an investment, but the problem in Bangladesh is that the actual amount of the budgeted of the budget that is used for real implementation. In many cases, there's only about 50%, or in our case, maybe 60 or 70%, because there are so many other expenses about security, about higher payments required for international consultants, transportation, and so forth. So the efficiency of budgeting is not very good. So this is what the plan is. Irrigation associations at the field channel level are supposed to be under the Ministry of Agriculture. And then at the field, at the branch canal level and main canal level, and the whole river system is supposed to be under the Ministry of Energy and Water. So you have two ministries involved there, and we'll see how it works out. The water user associations are at the main canal level with elected committees and legally registered. And then you have the sub-basin level and the basin level and the Supreme Water Council. Now, in snowmelt season, you can see the water here. The villages are all mud walled compounds with mud houses inside with domed roofs. But you can see there is enough water for irrigation. After the snowmelt, the rivers look like this. And our project, most of the fund of our project was for the structures required to regulate water on these canals. There is proportionate water division according to the fields to be irrigated. There is a whole system of traditional water rights. Some of it goes back centuries. So the apertures are left for the water to irrigate those fields according to their water rights. But of course, new areas have opened up. Urbanization has turned a lot of agriculture areas into towns and housing. So the old water rights sometimes conflict with the present requirement. Here is where a large wash with the water running down from the mountains has to go over the irrigation canal. So these are the kinds of structures built by our project. The farmers have to clean the silt, the mountain silt, every spring before the snow melt. And they have to give one person from every farmer family has to work here for usually 2, 3, 4 weeks to clean the silt out of the canals. So we helped form water user associations. I'm sitting there. Through a process of elected committees and legal registration with their charters and terms of bylaws and so forth. 2 minutes, yeah. And here they're voting. And this is at the main canal level with the wakil. The mirab at the branch canal level is a poor man who's trustworthy. The wakil at the main canal level is a rich man who is powerful, so they have both. If the water table is high, they get water from the pumps. Otherwise, household water is used by the women for activities, and we have a program of vegetable production by women within the compounds. Now, can food production keep up? We all know that increase of food production multifold is required, but you have to have infrastructure to do that. This is not like Israel, where with very, very limited water, they can produce unbelievable amount from it. But the agriculture department is weak. The administration is inefficient and poor, and most of them don't get enough salary, like they get maybe $30 or $50 a month. And when you ask them to come out, there's no transportation. There's negligible value chain. USAID, as you know, works hard to promote the whole value chain of agricultural products. But there's almost negligible storage, cold storage, marketing, infrastructure. There's no agricultural credit system. There was, but there is not now. and farmers don't change. So water users associations can improve it, but forming associations takes years, is spotty, and is something new to their culture. And the value chain is not there to support the marketable production. Also, kitchen gardens can produce a lot more, but even in our project, working 2 or 3 years with certain women's groups, there is slow improvement, but on a large scale to mitigate poverty and malnutrition is just not enough. Other tendencies, this rehabilitation work is very expensive. Groundwater over-extraction is increasing everywhere. Taliban conservatism may return, and with global warming, there's earlier snowmelt and less irrigation in summer, more evaporation, more weather extremes. Food imports are likely to decline because of the world food issues and declining potential of export from Pakistan and Central Asia. And Asian Development Bank has a new book called Food Price Escalation in South Asia, a serious and growing concern. Family planning is very weak. Abortion is illegal. Contraceptive prevalence is only about 20%. And as I said, completed fertility now is about 6. And so that's the situation that we are facing. Population will double at this rate in 30 years. How much can food production increase given the water shortage?
I think we have about 10, 15 minutes for any questions or further discussion on BT cotton, BT brinjal, water.
What does the Indian government plan to do if there's a developed resistance to BT toxin?
Well, right now, according to what I've read so far, they don't think that there is any problem with that. If there is a problem, then the Monsanto or whatever transnational corporations are selling the seeds, they'll come up with stacked genes. So there'll be more genes or new kinds of genes, new kind of GM crops. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, it's just the pattern with if you're using one mode of action against pests, they inevitably...
Yeah, you're right. I mean, when the primary pest is killed, it opens up a space for the secondary pest to become more important. It turns into a primary pest. So that's the cycle that keeps on getting repeated. But as long as you have private companies in the mix, they're going to say that technology can solve the problem. So.
I was wondering if are there any connections being made between, even though they're not necessarily attributable to transgenic crops, to the farmer suicides in Maharashtra, for example, and the public debate and or policy debates?
Right, that's a very important question. Famous journalists such as P. Sainath and others do see some kind of linkage. Vidarbh Jan Andolan, Kishore Tiwari, he's the leader of Vidarbh Jan Andolan. He also sees a clear linkage between the two. Other people such as Purvi Bhatt Mehta and others, IFPRI has published something by Purvi Bhatt Mehta, and they argue that there is really no linkage. So the scholarly and the public debate is still very contested over these issues. I have spoken to Cornell students who are working in Vidarbh right now in Maharashtra, and they think that the farmers commit suicide because of death because they're not used to growing cotton. It's a non-traditional crop for them. So they're slowly getting out of cotton and moving to soybean or some other crops which might be better for them. So we hope that that will create a solution for them.
I have a question about the economic
Yeah, that could be the SSRI method, which has been pioneered by some scientists, including the political scientist Norman Uphoff of Cornell. So it is possible that he was using the SSRI method, which does not use any genetically modified seeds. Yeah.
Clarence, I have a question about Afghanistan, the way you described it. So is there some sort of indigenous knowledge that may have preceded some sort of indigenous knowledge where water resources were managed more appropriately and the populations were better nourished? And was there some other form of managing those resources that just no longer hold that maybe could come back in some way?
Yes, actually, there was better organization for water resources management there than in most parts of South Asia because of the long involvement of Persian civilization. Herat, of course, was a very important part of the Persian Empire for many centuries. And I mentioned here that at the branch canal level, there is the Mirab, who is elected by consensus of the farmers, and he has to be trustworthy, and this has been there for centuries. And at the main canal level, there is the Wakil, who is also elected, and we have incorporated them into the water user associations, into everything we're doing. Their leadership is still there, but we're trying to give its organizational structure to deal with the modern situations. And there is a Jami book written about 500 years ago, which outlines water management in the language is Dari, which is really a part of Persian. And it gives the water rights of many of these areas, the larger part of the irrigation system. So that was all there in place. But the population growth, I think, has been the main factor. Herat used to be a town of 100,000, a couple 100,000, and now it's over 1 million. And as I said, in the last 30 years, the population has doubled. We have no idea what the population was before. But yes, the Jami book gives all of the traditional methods of management, but it's not enough for the present situation.
Please. Yeah.
So I have a question for Maloney. You talked about the new model that's been proposed for governance of water management.
Is she talking to me? I don't hear it.
Yes, sorry. I should.
Please stand up and talk loudly. I may not hear it.
So when you spoke about the new model for water management from the government side, where would you say that most of the decision-making power lies?
That what?
The most of the decision-making power?
Yeah.
Would you say it's in the local, from the village aspect, or would you say it's more of a top-down approach?
Well, that's a good question. There is a water management department, which is part of the ministry. Now, our project was under the water management department, but it's not like the water management departments or irrigation departments in the British, in the other parts of South Asia, which were built by the British and staffed with thousands of engineers. The irrigation systems in India, Bangladesh, Pakistan they have the system of management from the top with thousands and thousands of engineers, and now they are trying to develop water user associations to counter that. In Afghanistan, the water management department did practically nothing. If there was an emergency, it would intervene, and it was responsible for our project, largely for the construction. This whole idea of government management at the river level, at the river basin level, is totally new. And whether the local Mirabs and Wakils are willing to give over some of their authority to the higher level, even the councils, which are their representatives, and or to the water management department, is a totally new idea, and we just don't know if it'll work.
This is for Dave Pina. I know you've been in conversation with Ron Herring for years, but when you make Deshi, Swadeshi, and Maharashtra, and you put the GM seeds squarely in the multinational.
Right.
You line them up, and I've heard Herring speak many times about how there, I mean, I guess it falls under the stealth seeds category, but how there's many, many, many local varieties of BT cotton. I don't know about the eggplant area, but you were talking about cotton also, that there's so many that it really isn't. Basically, it seemed, from what I've understood of this argument, it really is not in the hands of multinationals anymore. I mean, that's one of his big points. So what do you think of that? Do you disagree?
Yeah, Professor Herring makes a very good point. Actually, Professor Anil Gupta of IIM Ahmedabad calls it the largest participatory farmer breeding project in the world. And it is true in Gujarat, farmers, I met many farmers who were just making their own BT cotton seeds. So this was a one-time event. I don't think that it was all planned ahead of time at all. So this just happened.
It's happened,
Yeah.
spontaneously.
Actually, that's the reason I mentioned these are Weberian ideal types, because the Indian government went ahead and released its own BT cotton, which had a BT gene license from Monsanto. This was called Bikaneri Narma, and it was released in 2009. The farmers were told they could save the seeds, but enough dissemination of information was not done. So I came across farmers in 2009 and 2010 who did not know that they could actually save the seeds and reuse those seeds. So in 2010, Bikaneri Narma was taken out of market by the government because it ran into some legal problems. So again, these are just Weberian ideal types. The state tries to get into organic farming if the farmers want that. The state tries to get into transnational seeds if the farmers want that. For the state, it's all about power, control, and legitimacy. But till now, in India, definitely the BT seeds are the property of multinational corporations. So multinational corporations, that's why I term them Bahurashtra
Ideal
seeds.
type. So it's
Yeah.
in the ideal world of legality.
Yeah, they're,
But on the ground, who knows?
who knows what could happen.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
exactly. Thank you.
Thanks.
So here in the United States, there's been an aggressive protection of patent laws concerning these BT crops.
Right.
Is there similar cases in India?
Uh,
I mean, freely.
No, you don't have cases of that sort like Percy Schmeiser or other cases in India, because as to the best of my knowledge, Monsanto seeds are not protected by patents in India. But what happens is that farmers go regularly to the markets to buy their seeds. Now we are talking about a huge seed market. I didn't have time to show some slides. According to the latest information we have, which is 2003 National Sample Survey Organization data, it shows that almost 48% of their farmers buy seeds from the market. So you're talking about a huge section of the population of farmers which still does not buy seeds from the market. Among farmers, only 30% replace their seeds every year. Most of them don't replace their seeds every year. So you're talking about potentially a huge market for either state-owned corporations or transnational or private seed corporations. So I think we have to look towards the future, and that's why this debate becomes more important, whether we should really go in for traditional seeds or we should let states, seed corporations and domestic seed firms flourish, or whether we should let transnational seed corporations in conjunction with private partners flourish, domestic partners flourish.